okay, well, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are terrible at taking the day off or taking even an afternoon off and doing any sort of rest. And I know that a lot of people who work from home are having trouble disconnecting from their
Mhm.
work. But we're going to go deeper than that because from what you've just said, maybe we think we're resting,
Yeah.
but we're really not, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And we can dive into those 7 kinds of rest that I've talked about on my platform. And because, like I'd mentioned, everyone thinks like, yeah, I'm resting. I spent all of Christmas laying on the couch, like watching Christmas movies. And you're like, no, like that's not really how that works. So I will shape a lot of my examples around Christmas just because of that time of year that had recently passed. And a lot of people can correlate with that. So I will talk about the rest that can relate mostly with Christmas first, and then I'll add the other ones in between because I have to add new examples for that one. So the first one that I'll use is like a sensory rest. So often
Mm.
a sensory rest is just like from the noise, from the craziness that's gone on. Like my biggest example that I just gave recently was like, think about the fact that you have to go to 2 Christmas events in a day. You have to haul all your kids there. It's an ugly Christmas sweater event, so you're already wearing an itchy sweater. You get to the first event, the ham is already burning, uncle's laughing in the living room, Christmas music is playing, someone's calling for you there, you hear the rustling of the presents under the tree, and like, I made very small examples, but I think everyone is already feeling like that itch under
Yeah.
their skin from that. And that is that sensory rest. And that exists in workplace too, right? Like whether they have corporate events that you have to go out to, and you've been already standing in your very uncomfortable high heels all day, and now you're going to go to this corporate event, and then you're going to do it all again tomorrow without taking
Yep.
some sensory rest. And my biggest tips and takeaway for sensory rest is like, some people know this, but some people subconsciously know this, is like a favorite pair of pajamas or that like outfit that you always wear either after or the day that you've planned your rest, is always go into that same outfit, because then your
Mm.
body and mind kind of connect that rest. Is like, oh, like once I put on these jammies, I know that I can rest. Or after a long day of standing in your heels, throwing on that outfit to tell your body to just like relax, like truly take away the tension that's been sitting in your body all day.
So that when you say sensory rest, it's changing, I guess, the feel of the clothing, it's quieting your environment, that sort of thing is what you mean.
Totally, yeah, and I sometimes even mention, like, I know it's not applicable for all people, but sometimes even going on do not disturb if needed, because like,
Mm.
the sensory from our phone as well, whether you can delegate to your partner or turn on your phone so that you only get important calls, very, very important thing at the end of the day.
Right, right. It just feels calming as I think about that. And at any time of year, I can see how this would be powerful. I'm imagining the spring when, if you have kids, there's a million activities, or it's towards the end of school and you feel like you're going all the time. So same thing. Yeah.
Totally, yeah, and even in the summer, like, I'm thinking about it now, like, that sticky hot summer and, being out all day and like, at a little beach or something, totally, lots of ways to apply it.
Awesome. Okay. So sensory rest is one. Perfect.
Yes, and then the next one is the rest that everyone thinks about when they talk about rest. This is that physical rest.
Mm.
That actual laying down, the not hustling and bustling around, right? For those of us that might be really active, it may be the time to, maybe not stop that activity you really like doing, but doing a gentler activity. For CrossFitters, power trainers, or powerlifters, or whatever it might be, is going for something more gentle, as well as, when you do physically rest, again, that do not disturb also applies in this situation. Is you're not answering work emails, you're not on social media, whatever your kind of, workplace looks like. You maybe take a day off of your any social platforms that you might work on and go on do not disturb, and maybe it's a day of just like light stretching, and like,
Mm.
maybe you don't cook that day, you plan towards the day that, like, you order yourself some food and have like a really slow going day. And sometimes it really means a it's kind of a big deal when you actually flip a real book versus an ebook. Obviously, those of us may not have accessibility to that, but it takes you away from the screen, that physical stimulation that you get from staring at a phone all day. Because obviously, even when you turn on your ebooks and if you don't turn off the rest of the notifications, you're just going to get everything all at once.
You know what? I'm a big ebook reader, and that is a very good point.
I mean, if you have a Kindle, I totally get it because then it totally turns it off. But like, I get it. I'm an ebook reader too, right? And it's like, it's right there. But then as you're reading it without turning off the do not disturb, you see the notifications
Yep.
pinging up top. And then it draws your attention away from that wonderful story that you may have been reading.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So physical rest can be lightening your workout, slowing down, doing your day a little differently. It's not necessarily just napping and sleeping, right?
Totally. And there's nothing wrong with napping and sleeping too, because I think that, of course, like new parents and people like that really need that. But I want people to remember that it's not the only way to rest at the end of the day.
I like that. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So then, number 3.
Yes, we will move on to emotional rest. So this one still
Mm.
kind of ties into Christmas as well. I know the holidays really kind of bring on a lot of mixed emotions for people, not always positive, not always neutral at the end of the day. And so, when you think of those big holiday gatherings that you are going to because it will make your mom happy, because it's just what you did as a family growing up and always did as you grew up. And on top of that, maybe going to a corporate event for your partner, not because you want to, but because your partner, is going and this is a big thing. And so you say, okay. But you might also work a really people-y job. Like, as you said, as a teacher or as a nurse, you have
Mhm.
to deal with a lot of energies going day in and day out. And adding all of that and Christmas on top of it is you need that emotional rest from everything. Again, it's like that do not disturb that I tell people to turn on. Or maybe you set very firm boundaries at these Christmas events to say that, you know what, I'm coming from this time to this time, and then I will leave at the end of it. And
Mm.
it's for my own good at the end of the day. And when you put up boundaries to tell family or friends to say, I don't want to do this, and this is my limit, and this is what I can give you. And if they still say no, it's for them to process and not for you to push your own boundary and to do that one thing because family really wants you to do it. And so that's a really big one. Or even to these corporate events, I always say, you and your partner, especially if they're really good partners, have like a little scapegoat and say, oh, a little tummy ache or something. And that way
Yes.
you can get yourself home at the end of the day, but understand that don't have FOMO and give into it too and be like, oh, like, what if I miss out on all these fun things that could happen? And then you end up going and then you really do, fizzle out the rest of the social battery that you do have and, could be
Right.
quite detrimental going forward.
It's a good point that some of us have jobs that are very people-y. I like how you said that
Mhm.
because depending on the day, that group of people could really drain us emotionally.
Totally.
I mean, 100% I remember this from teaching. Absolutely. Some days are great and you get all sorts of positive energy, and some days are the opposite of that.
Totally.
So, good point to have a break.
Yes.
Yeah, in whatever way we need to. Yeah.
Mhm. And then we can move
Yeah.
on to talk a little bit because they kind of connect together is like that social rest. I often talk about a
Mhm.
lot of corporate people. Like Fridays are a big day where people are like, let's go out for drinks or let's go out for dinner. Or, midweek they do like a midweek lunch and everything. And again, it's looking at your own social battery and considering what do I have the capacity for? I think a big thing that I do talk about as well is for those that still have their menstrual cycle, but even for those that don't, it's just that you have to keep track of your energy fluctuations is depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, you may or may not have the capacity to be
Mm.
socializing and taking in the energy and the emotions of other people, and that's very normal. It's another one of those mechanisms in our body that we've been told to like shut away, not listen to. We can do it. It's corporate. I have to look good. It's my new job, not considering the fact that your body has been screaming at you for like days to be like, don't do this, please don't do this.
Yes, great point. And this is something that I mean, I'm in my 50s, so, just putting it out there, I didn't know anything about that until
Mhm.
recently. Zero. So I went through my whole life just having no idea that that was a thing, to pay attention to these different times of the month for emotional and social reasons as well. Yeah.
Totally. And like I think that it can sometimes for women even come to a point of like shame. It'll be like, well, so and so is doing it. Why can't I do it? Like they feel good,
Mhm.
so I should feel good too. And I think that this is a great podcast for this space to teach people that, you know what, this is so normal that we lean into our cycle. And for things like socializing, we don't do it just for a couple of days until things have blown over or until the cycle has reset because it always does.
Yeah. And I don't want us to get too far off track. However, I
Mhm.
know there are people listening right now who are saying, well, wait, which part of the month are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because they don't have a clue. So can you like tell us quickly?
Yes, of course. So your most sociable time is usually right after your period in that follicular phase and your early luteal phase. So that'd be follicular ovulation and early luteal. And that usually will last you from I'll give a couple of days after period. So let's say day 8. And then, if your cycle is normal from like up to day 21, just before your next cycle, sometimes less depending on some people, but those are kind of your peak energy days because as soon as you kind of hit late luteal and of course into menstruation, your body's like, nope, tap me out,
Mm,
I'm done kind of thing. But so that'll be a big thing for listeners as well is to start tracking if they don't already do. And then they can start to really become in tune with where they are and why their energy is fluctuating.
that's a great tip. Thank you. I'm convinced there are people who just learned something right now. So awesome.
Hooray. And then with that, I will also then jump into like a mental rest because it often ties into that menstrual cycle bit as well, is where your kind of brain is at, whether it's having another endeavor like you and I do outside of our jobs,
Hmm.
as well as dealing with people at our work and wanting to like build new ideas and all these new things that you want to do, and even for people that are like, oh, I want to play soccer, or oh, I want to be part of like the leadership team of this thing, or parent council, or whatever it might be, is keeping in mind, what is on your plate and what is needed of you. Like, what things are like, you can tangibly plan around and which things you can't tangibly plan around, like, with our endeavors, our secondary endeavors of podcasting and everything, we can kind of plan our lives around that, which is something very beautiful. And then oftentimes if we have a day job, those are harder things to kind of plan around, and considering that going in and taking some mental rest, because oftentimes if our day job will totally drain us, we will have no spark left to do the
True.
wonderful thing that we want to plan. And that mental rest again is shutting off the phone, your content planning calendar, your idea mind map can wait. The person that is waiting for your information, they will wait for you because there is something that they're going to take away from you. And tomorrow isn't going to run away from us. I think that is what I try to remind people. Don't forget, tomorrow will not run away from you.
Good point. Good
Mhm.
point. Because a lot of times all of this stuff is running in the back of our minds all the time, too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So part of it is probably figuring out a way to quiet that temporarily.
Totally. And that's why it's like sometimes it's just like shutting off your phone. And again, whether you have an e reader or actually flipping open a book that you just want to read or to like lose yourself in for a little bit, it's a really good thing. And I think that a big thing I talk about as well is like a lot of people are like, oh, I have so many hobbies or so many things that I want to do. And I jump from thing to thing to thing. And, sometimes including quieter things, excuse me, like reading
Mm,
and, you know, spending time with family, going out and like, in a quiet space like a coffee shop, or just like quietly walking on a treadmill with a podcast going. It's like those are some great spaces where that spark comes back in a place where you're not just sitting in front of your desk and like, you're ready and you're like, I can do this and go. And nothing comes.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that becomes frustrating and then it's a whole thing. Yes.
Yes. And then that also leads into my next one, which is that creative rest in the sense of where people are like, oh, like I knit, I crochet, I do this, I podcast, I do like digital marketing. And it's like, those are a lot of creative things. And that creative bank of ours sometimes can run dry because
Mhm.
we're being pulled every which way. And it's not to say that we're not talented and totally able to do all these things. But oftentimes we need to rest that part of us. And so sometimes it is sitting back and, if you have the capacity for it, because as you can see, some of the rest blend together, is if you
Mhm.
have a little capacity to watch a YouTube of somebody else who's, you know, doing digital art and then being like, wow, like I'm so inspired. And then, taking a bit of rest back and kicking back and being like, I'm going to do some physical rest, some gentle stretching. And maybe in those moments, like I said before, is where that spark kicks in. You're like, something came to me in this moment. And like maybe you don't jump on it right away because you don't have capacity that day. But that's why our phones are so lovely, or a scratch pad, and writing down an
Yes.
idea, being as specific as you can, and then you will come back to it on a different day. And that's totally okay.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is one of the things I use OneNote for on my phone and on my iPad and on everywhere. I'm always jotting things down because
Yeah.
I don't want to. I do worry that I'll forget. So if I write it down, then I can let that worry go, right? I'm not going to forget,
Mhm.
but maybe I'm not going to do it right now.
Totally. And it's just, we have so much accessibility, and just remembering that, like, the idea isn't going to like fizzle out and run away by any means. You can always come back to it and it'll always be there for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and then
Absolutely.
I will move on to the last kind of rest, which is, it can kind of fluctuate because it may not fall into everyone's court at the end of the day, but that spiritual rest. And my biggest example of that is like, you often follow a lot of like these wellness individuals, and they're like, yeah, I get up and I drink my coffee, and I have a cold plunge, and then I meditate for 20 minutes. And again, those are wonderful things. I'm by no means bashing what they do. There are wonderful health benefits of that, but also keeping in mind is that a good fit for for the individual, right? And considering
Mm.
the fact, is it now affecting your daily life, because now you have to include the fact that you have to do a cold plunge every morning and you have to meditate for 20 minutes at a time. Being so stuck structurally, and forgetting the fact that, like, that is so and so's routine, not Cherry's routine at the end of the day, and it's okay to fluctuate that routine to fit you at the end of the day.
Really good point. Really good point. And I actually am going to be doing a podcast episode on meditation. And I am trying to remember whether it will have already gone out at the point we're talking or not.
No
So, listeners, I'll
worries.
have to clarify that for you later.
Mhm,
But it's something that I think is a fit for some people and isn't a fit for some people. And so I'm
mhm.
glad you're bringing this up. Maybe for some people it's prayer that feels like the better thing, or maybe it's just being quiet, which is both of those are kind of meditation anyway, but it just feels better to do it that way. So
Totally.
very good point.
Yes, and so I think that those 7 kinds of rest, like I was talking about, kind of meld into each other, blend into each other, and often you just have to select. I often tell people to select a top 3 within themselves, because sometimes all 7 types of rest aren't applicable, for them, and so I say pick a top 3, and, when you know your top 3, and when you know you're having, like a bit of a like emotional, I wouldn't say distress, but like you're feeling a little heavy, is looking at these top 3 kinds of rest that you feel are applicable for you, and being like, right, I went to that corporate thing last week. I am this far into my cycle and I have a very large project at work. And then it kind of helps you to hone in on which areas you might need at the end of the day to
Hmm.
rest in.
Now, do you find any patterns with people that you work with or talk with on which is the toughest or the most challenging for them to do, or which they're neglecting, or anything like that?
I think it might actually be physical is actually a hard one. People are like, "Yeah, I lay down all the time," but we just talked about it. People lay down and watch Netflix. So, like, at the end of the day,
Hmm.
like, they're not resting, period. And I think that maybe that social piece is a really big one, as well as, as work has picked back up and corporate events have picked back up since COVID, people have this either a big sense of FOMO, or their capacities have, decreased from what it even was
Yes.
before. And, they still want to keep up with what they were pre-COVID. And so they're doing all these things and their body just cannot handle it.
Yes.
As well as that sensory piece, right? Because, working in COVID, working like from home, or, just having a couple noises versus having the noises of the restaurant, the noises of the copier, the noises of this and that, right? Like it seems that the body becomes a little dysregulated because it's like, whoa, like I found a point of regulation that I should have had all along. And I
Right.
found a point of, maintenance, and then you threw me back into it. And now I'm very dysregulated and I can't do this.
You know what? That makes so much sense to me. Oh my goodness. I worked in an office prior to COVID
Mhm.
and no longer do that. I'm always working from home in all my endeavors. And at first I said, oh, I am not going to like this. I'm definitely an extrovert. I
Mhm.
definitely get energy from people. However, over that long period of time, I can tell I have changed. Like, I am
Mm.
way more comfortable with less interaction with people. I still get
Mhm.
energy from being around people, but it's different. Exactly what you're just saying.
Yeah,
And I wondered, was that me? Was that happening to everyone? And I'm imagining an introvert might even have more of an issue with being so social all the time now because we just got used to not doing it.
totally. And I think that, in some job titles, those things are just unavoidable. We can't avoid those things. And so I think it's like kind of retraining the body to some of those social things. And that's why it's very important. For example, the things that you can change is making sure that when you're going to work, it's comfy outfits. If there's no dress code, you like ditch the comfy outfit. Or maybe when you're in the office, is getting some of those. Obviously, we are not sponsored, but I really like them. The loop earplugs that go in, so you only hear what you need to, and there's just ambient noise while you do things. And
Mm.
maybe at lunchtime, you step away from your desk and make sure you go somewhere else, whether it's outside or in like a quiet cafeteria where maybe you don't want to talk to anyone. And that's okay. I think one of the biggest tips that sometimes I give to some of my clients that, they have to share like a shared lunchroom with people that talk is like, just put in headphones as if you are going to listen to something, but there can be nothing going on. And no one needs
Yeah,
to know. No one needs to know.
such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can kind of motion at them,
Yes,
sorry.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And at the end of the day, it's like you're just protecting yourself and setting up the boundaries for yourself and, hope that other people respect that because, like I said, a lot of people are learning a lot more about their bodies and our bodies have probably been screaming at us for a really long time and it's okay to hone in and listen to it once again in this narrative of a world that's, go 3,000 miles an hour kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I wanted to pull out of what you were saying a few minutes ago is I think people might need me to repeat that what you just said is that lying on the couch and watching Netflix is not really resting.
No,
So,
no, it's not because you know what? Most people don't even end up doing that because you lie on the couch and you're watching Netflix. Your phone starts pinging off. You pick up your phone, you answer the text, or maybe that text had a puppy video in it. You click the puppy video, and then once you watch the puppy video, you start scrolling. And then now you have the stimulus of both what's in front of you and the noise from the TV behind you. And like, there's no resting in that. Your brain is still very stimulated in a way that it just does not need to be.
wow, such a good point. I can absolutely see that happening.
Yes, yes, and it happens often. A lot of my clients that I've talked to, and I'm not here to scrutinize them, but I obviously ask them very honestly, like, now tell me the truth. Like, do you have both the TV and your phone going? And then they go a little quiet and they say yes.
So, I guess what we're saying is enjoy your favorite shows if you want to, and at the same time, know that that's not really rest and you need something else.
And I know it can be really hard for people, like as adults, they're like, well, when I was a kid, I could just rest however I wanted. And like now as adults, like truly at the end of the day, it's like you have to plan it. Like, whether you end up having like a day off, taking a personal day, whatever that might be, and planning out what you'd like that to look like. Maybe it is you do have to attend to appointments. So attend to your appointments on the personal day. And then make sure you lay out what it's going to look like when you have your rest for the afternoon. Do you go on Do Not Disturb? Do you actually physically pull out a book and read a book? Do you step out of your house and maybe, shake things up a little and go somewhere to have a walk? Plan it out, because at this point, with how fast life is expected to be, like, you kind of have to plan it out. There's just no way around it.
I agree with you 100%. And maybe if someone is really struggling with this, even if it's an hour or a half day, right? It's still maybe starting that habit.
Totally. And like not being afraid to, reach out to your partner or your family and saying, like, I'm really struggling in this area. And maybe just asking very kindly, like even saying, like, could you just take the little one to the park for just an hour? And that would be just enough for you to reset. And you got to remember, in that hour that the little one's gone, you're not catching up on laundry, you're not doing
Mm.
anything, whether you have to like lock yourself in your room and like throw in the headphones and whatever it might be, is allow yourself that rest. Because I emphasize this on my platforms as well. It's like dishes aren't going to stop piling up. Laundry's never going to stop piling up. The dishwasher is always going to be full. And so just lay down for a hot second. It's going to be fine. It always gets done.
Yes, it always does get done somehow in
Yeah.
life, in the house, in the job, in the business. It always gets done.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I always remind people is like, okay, like let's take it to a little bit of the extreme. Is tomorrow everything goes poof and it's gone? Like, does the laundry matter at the end of the day? Do the dishes really matter at the end of the day, right? What is the priority? Is that your little one got to go to the park and giggle with the grandparent for the day, that you got to just lay there for a hot second and take your deepest breath of the day so that you can be regulated for your little one when they come back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe it's also asking for help. Maybe, a parent, a grandparent can come over and help with the laundry because it got so piled up, or who knows. Yeah.